Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I see we have very intimate evenings tonight. I guess by now you figured out I'm Peter Gelb, General Manager of the Metropolitan Opera, where every day lately feels like Cyber Monday. Thank you for joining us for tonight's discussion about Giordano's Fedora, which is returning to the Met for the first time in 25 years. In spite of the recent cyber attack, as I'm sure you know, we haven't missed a performance, and we're certainly not going to miss a rehearsal for Fedora, which was rehearsing today, and we're preparing for its grand opening on New Year's Eve, and it will certainly take more than a cyber attack to take down the Met. The composer of Fedora was Umberto Giordano, who also composed Andrea Chenier. It was based on the late 19th century play by Sardou that starred Sarah Bernhardt. Fedora has been a vehicle for famous sopranos and tenors, including sopranos in recent decades, Mirella Freni and Renato Scotto, and tenors from Enrico Caruso to Placido Domingo. I'm happy to report that we have the pitch-perfect soprano and tenor to follow in those illustrious footprints. Fedora also has a fantastical plot where, in true verismo fashion, love is undermined by impulsive acts of passion as the action moves from a palace in imperial Russia to fashionable Paris to its tragic conclusion in the Swiss Alps. It takes a great stage director with conviction to untangle its plot twists, and a great conductor with true verismo savvy to bring its powerful score to life, and we're very fortunate to have both of them here. They are readying Fedora to be served to you, complete with stunning sets and splendid-looking costumes, all fitting for an opening night at the Metropolitan Opera on New Year's Eve. The Met will definitely be the place to be, particularly if you would like to escape from the verismo morass, otherwise known as the world in which we are currently living. With that, I would like to introduce a fantastic four on stage with me. To my left is the glamorous and fearless soprano who has conquered leading roles at the Met, from Mimi to Desdemona to Violetta to Tosca to Elizabeth in our new production of Don Carlos last season to Fedora now. She's one of opera's leading stars. Please welcome Bulgarian soprano Sonya Yoncheva. And next to Sonya is one of the world's great tenors, a mainstay on the stage of the Met ever since his 2006 debut as the Duke in Rigoletto. He has sung nearly 150 performances with us, all in major roles. He's starring in two new Met productions this season as Count Loris in Fedora, and after our February break in the title role of Lohengrin, which makes Wagner fans very excited. Please welcome the pride of Poland, tenor Piotr Beczała. From his Met debut directing Il Trovatore in 2009 to his most recent production of Medea that opened our current season, he has mastered everything from Baroque to bel canto and from Verdi to Puccini. Please welcome Sir David McVicar. And to David's left is one of the Met's essential maestros with an amazing 479 Met performances on his resume and counting. And he looks very young, too. He made his house debut in 1998 conducting La Bohème, and since then has led all the major works of the Italian and French repertory, from La Fille du Régiment to Madame Butterfly. We're thrilled he's on the podium for Fedora. Please welcome Marco Armiliato. First, I'd just like to give a very quick synopsis. Check this out. Fedora, played by Sonya, is a Russian princess whose husband-to-be is fatally wounded the night before their wedding. Fedora vows vengeance. The suspected murderer is Count Loris, played by Piotr, who fatefully falls in love with Fedora. When she discovers that the Count was justified in killing her fiancé, Fedora falls in love with him as well, but not before she has put in motion the wheels of revenge that ultimately proves to be their undoing. How's that?
Nothing. Keep going.
Yeah.
That's it. That's as much as I'm going. You can elaborate on that. So David, let's begin by getting your thoughts on the opera and the new production you've created. We have a David. We have a model photo of each. That's not the model. That's a different model.
No. I'm just going to...
We have a model photo, just let me say, of the 3 acts. This is a 3-act opera. So maybe you can comment on those or whatever.
Why don't I just talk and we can run through these and they can make up their own mind.
Anyway, go ahead.
It's listen, I'm not going to pretend to anyone that this is a neglected masterpiece. However, what it is an extremely effective piece of music theatre that has a validity and a strength and a passion all of its own. You can just click through these, guys, because I'm not going to describe what's going on. When I started working on Fedora, I've done Chenier in London, which is a better piece than Fedora because it is a better libretto, because Giordano was working with Luigi Illica, who was Puccini's libretto. He made such a fantastic job of condensing another Sardo play, Tosca, into a great opera, and the opera Tosca is better than the play. And I also have done, here in New York, we actually did it, Adriana with Piotr, which, Adriana Lecouvreur, which has the same librettist, Arturo Colautti, who was a journalist and an editor, and his opera libretti were a sideline. He really wasn't a man of the theatre, and he sort of handed Giordano and Shalea very sort of lame duck of a libretto, and both composers just willingly set it to music. And this is sort of why Fedora is not a staple of the repertory. It contains absolutely ravishing music from start to finish. Many musicologists and critics claim that Fedora is a one-tune opera, meaning the Amortivieta that Piotr sings. It's not true at all. It's an beautifully exquisite score. Lovely melodies come tumbling over each other. What it does lack is a sure sense of dramaturgy, a sure sense of storytelling. And when you have to put it on stage, that is your principal problem. And when I started studying the piece, I was thinking to myself, why was this so popular? Because it was wildly successful on its premiere. Not just because Caruso was making his debut and that was a sensation. It was wildly successful right up until the Second World War, when it sort of fell from the repertory and the flame was held by people like Magda Olivero and Renata Tebaldi. And it suddenly occurred to me, because to its contemporary audience, it must have seemed so modern. Because, first of all, they're looking at a stage filled with singers wearing exactly what they're wearing. The fact that Act 1 is like Act 1 of Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap, to them would have seemed incredibly modern. The fact that there's so much business with telegrams and letters and doorbells ringing and people arriving unexpectedly would have seemed to the contemporary audience like, this is our world. The fact that one of the motors of the story is everyone's dread of the Russian nihilist movement would have seemed very contemporary to them, because the nihilist movement was the European terrorist movement of that time. And that was a real thing. I mean, the Russian nihilists became the cradle of Bolshevism. The European nihilist movement managed to assassinate at least 2 heads of state, Tsar Alexander II of Russia and Empress Elizabeth of Austria. So thinking about that, I just went, I have to treat this as with much respect as I would to something which I would consider to be a greater piece, a piece by Wagner, a piece by Mozart. Let's just set aside the problems of the piece and address it by treating it with great respect. And in this way, I've managed to sort of like find a way through, find a way to do it. It's cracking theatre. It's great theatre. I've said in interviews, I said, it's like 3 things. It's like binge watching Downton Abbey. It's like a fantastic period movie starring Garble or Marlene Dietrich, which are great works of art in their own right. And when you go like, okay, it doesn't quite work, but it's got fabulous music. Let's treat it with love. Let's love it and bring it to life. And you know what? If you do that, and if you try and sort out exactly what is going on, it does come to life, and it does work. And it has an energy and a drama all of its own. And for us, yes, it is like stepping back in time, for sure. But even that in an operatic performance is still a valid experience. And that's the way that we've approached it.
Well, I think, what you said, David, is so typical of your approach to all the works that you do, which is, first, you don't take on a work unless you're going to treat it totally seriously. And that's why, as an observer in the rehearsals, I would say that what you're accomplishing is bringing out all the details and making it credible and theatrically real. You talked about the music, so before we turn to our stars, Marco, I want to ask you, because the music is beautiful, which of course for opera is a lot about the music, right? We actually have a bit of the intermezzo, the second act intermezzo, which is so gorgeous, from the 1997 radio broadcast of the Met, which I thought we could play if you have that queued up somewhere. So that certainly sounds beautiful. Marco, why don't you talk about the music?
Well, you just listen just a little part of Fedora. This intermezzo happens in a moment that I think it's a kind of zip of anything happened during the opera. Like we have the melody, you have the romantic part, and the drama. It's already on the air. You feel that it's not Cavalleria Rusticana. Cavalleria Rusticana, we know exactly what it is. It's the moment that we wait for the second part. Here, it's just a transition between all what we hear before and what is going to happen later on. I find that this kind of intermezzo is a magic moment happen in a verismo opera. To me, it's nothing less than Pagliacci, Cavalleria Rusticana, or the most important and famous intermezzo we have in the repertoire. Fedora, it's a very special opera. It's so difficult to perform because it's kind of puzzle, I can say. Everything is happening in 3 different places. We are in St. Petersburg, Act 1. We are in Paris, second act. And the music underlines constantly what's going on stage. The situation it's a drama. Basically, it's a drama. But in the same way, I think Giordano followed his instinct and tried to play in a romantic way and put the drama in the romantic way. And that combination makes the opera very interesting. The history is complicated. As David said before, it's so very celebrating about the Fedora role. Loris, every single character have his own details and all is firm sign. But in the music, I have a blast because it's fantastic. This opera was written after André Chenier, but if you look at the music, it looks like he wrote before André Chenier. I mean, it's like it's very controversial. You feel in the music this kind of controversial thing. To me, Fedora is a masterpiece. Musically talking, it's a beautiful piece. I agree with David that it's not a great opera to perform. It's very difficult to perform, and believe on that is, I fell in love doing Fedora during my life. Happened not many times because it's not performed as much as Bohème, Rigoletto, and Traviata. But to me, it's one of the beautiful jewels in the Italian repertoire.
And of course, Marco, you don't put on a production of Fedora unless you have great singers. So, and here we have two of the greatest.
That's very important because we are lucky to have Sonya in this age that she performing that role amazing. We just did a production and in La Scala recently, and she was, of course, outstanding as usual. She is. And we have the lucky to have probably the best Loris today, because to me the sound of Piotr Beczała in this opera is so appropriate, it's so right. The color, the sound, the way he's singing is so beautifully. And every time we rehearsing, I already imagine what's going on in the future for the performance, and I see him so perfect. Involved in the Loris Ipanov exactly as Fedora on Sonya. So the match that we have here, the performer that we got for this production is really outstanding. Thanks to the Met again for building this kind of cast. Also for the small roles like Rosa Feola as outstanding Olga, and Lucas Mechlem is a beautiful, amazing Désirée X. So I mean, the packages is completely, and of course we have a beautiful orchestra and the set that my friend David is a genius. I tell you, believe me, yes. No, but yeah. with Sonya, we're talking about that for days, because we just did another production of Fedora. And I don't want to compare the two productions because the two conceptions are different, and nothing to say about that. But to me, for my taste, for my point of view, from my conception of the opera, this is a real Fedora, because every single details, every single note, every single words in the libretto, that is not a great libretto, you can say that? It's not a great libretto in terms of text. It's so difficult for them to remember the words, because are words that I'm Italian, I never say this kind of word. I never pronounce in my life this kind of word, like,
so,
you know. But make a show like this and perform in this way Fedora, it's mean something very important. Not only for the Met, not only for New York, it's important for the opera world, that we can say, hey, Fedora is that.
Well, thank you, Marco. So Sonya, first of all, thank you for choosing La Scala for your out-of-town tryout.
It couldn't be better.
What attracted you to this role? I mean, this is a role that has been sung by opera stars sort of at the end of their career, and you're in your prime of your career. What drew you to it now?
Also, yeah, it's because I always wanted to escape from this kind of cliche, you know. I heard so many times, you know, this part you should do it when you're 50, and this one when you're 45. I think we all have sensation, we all have feelings, and each of us has. I have my voice, you have your own. You can decide in a moment of your career where exactly you want to sing something. I felt something about Fedora because of her Slavic soul, you know. This way of loving and hating people in the same time, it was very fascinating for me as an actress to play it on stage. And knowing Slavic people, knowing something about, even though I'm Bulgarian and I'm a little bit more on the south, kind of oriental spirit, but still I know this kind of extreme way of loving and hating people. And this is what happens to Fedora. She, maybe in a frame of time of 10 minutes, she hates this man, and then she starts to love him passionately. Because at the end of the day, Fedora she's a princess, and this is all fascinating, but she's a woman, and she needs love and protection. And that's what she seeks. That's what she wanted from her first fiancé who got killed. Patrick, I saw you. Patrick is here. And then she seeks the same with Loris. And Loris proves to be the man who defended her, even she didn't know about that. And, you know, of course, then I can speak about it as a singer. That is an absolutely fascinating score. It's so challenging. I am here from the first moment until the end. There's so much to play on stage.
Right, you're on stage almost the entire time. The
entire show, yeah. You have an overdose of me.
As overdoses go, that's not too bad. Do you want to speak more about the music?
The music is absolutely glorious. Really, one of the most beautiful and challenging music I've performed as a singer, because it asks me, it demands from me to be extremely homogenical, if I can say that, in the whole register of the soprano, even of the mezzo-soprano, because it's a very low part. And in the same time, it asks me to be a very, how to say, certain stamina, so I can go through all these dramatic parts and to move with the knees, because, you know, David created for me such an amazing set and such an amazing story. We were talking the other day, I had so many questions about Fedora, even though I already did my homework at La Scala, but I finally understood the story with him. you know, it's complicated. There are a lot of letters on stage. I have to know why I wrote this and who received it and why this arrives in that moment exactly. It's all about telegrams and letters. And finally, David really opened our eyes, and especially mine. And I could see into the story, and many of the colors of my voice took the right, let's say, shade, like the right color.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, Piotr, how do you feel about, this is your role debut.
Well, for me, it's the first time. I never sang the role. Of course, I sang the aria many times. Everybody is joking that the opera is about Amor di Vita, but it's just 1 minute, 5 seconds of music. And
this is what your second act, right?
yes, it's the famous aria. But you know,
when you declare your love for Fedora.
Yes. But you know, it's just, of course, through the whole opera, you hear that in the intermezzo also. The melody is following us through the piece. But for me, this opera is kind of thriller. It's really like David says, a little Agatha Christie, a little Lieutenant Columbo, you know, telling stories. You know, you explain the story, the problem in the 5 minutes. Then you have 15 minutes talking around, and then somebody's coming, and you know what happens in the last 15 minutes. So it's pretty complicated. A lot of parlando, you know, from the point of view of a tenor. It's of course the aria everybody knows, but there is a lot of small moments. They are very beautiful. They are not arias, they are not complete pieces, but they are part of the scene, and the excitement is coming from one level to another level, and it's really complicated. And as Sonya told, that David explained us the story finally. That nobody knows what it's about. You know, you have 20 letters, and when you don't know what it's about the timing. Because timing is very important in this opera. Why the telegram is coming sooner than the letter, and if it will be at the opposite way, it could be a very short story, because
we could finish at second act.
We could finish in the middle of second act, yeah. But it's the opera is very dramatic. When I say yes, I was agreed to sing that, and of course I know the story about Caruso was the first Loris, and every great tenor sang us in the past. So I didn't know what happens in the story, to be honest, and so I started to study the score, and there are a lot of drama, a lot of complications what we have in this story. It's really the amount of complications. It's really very interesting, and it's bring me to the world of verismo a little closer.
There's another discussion taking place back there. I don't know. So David, you know, one of the things that we talked about earlier, and which Sonya and Piotr are describing, is how you bring your lucid storytelling to this complicated plot. And I think just as Piotr and Sonya have been helped in understanding the timing and the details of it, you make that crystal clear for the audience as well. I have a question for you about your scenic choices, because, you know, the audiences, I'm sure many of you saw the Medea that David did, which was written 100 years earlier, and actually features some significant kind of abstraction pieces of scenery, most notably the fantastic mirror that you had, the angled mirror, in which images appear, both reflections and video images. In this production, this verismo opera, which was written 100 years later, you're much more scenically specific. And could you talk a little bit about how you make those choices?
Because that's the best way to tell the story. What I scenically put on stage is what I think is the best way to tell the story.
Right.
I've made some, I don't know if anyone remembers when I did Handel's Agrippina. in New York.
Sure.
But that was a very, very different visual world. But that was absolutely the best way to tell that story, and also to handle a Handelian opera where you have very quick multiple scene changes. This just works in the genre of the. It was called the well-made play back in its time. It's what Victorian Sadu, the original dramatist who created the story Fedora, excelled in. It's what it's the kind of drama that the 19th century loved, which is why not very much good drama was written in the 19th century until you hit Chekhov and Strindberg, and then suddenly things get a lot more interesting. They wanted plays which were about dramatic situations, but set in a recognizable world. And very, very few of these plays are still performed. Another revolutionary, I'd say, was George Bernard Shaw. But I'm just going to go back to what I said earlier. It's like the scenic choices, we've made are about honoring the genre, honoring the world, honoring what the original authors wanted to put on stage, right. But we need to do it in a way which makes it valid for us, makes it believable for us. It's a period piece. It's a period piece in every way, in its music, in its dramatic construction, and what people look like. There's nothing wrong with doing a period piece.
No, not at all. It's just interesting. I think for me
Amen.
personally,
Amen.
Amen. For me personally, it's interesting though that since you now have directed 13 operas at the Met, that the verismo operas in particular, like Pagliacci,
I changed the period of Pagliacci.
No, but I'm saying. Right, but in Pagliacci...
Oh, I understand what you... I get what you... No, the world is very specific.
Right, exactly.
It's verismo. It's
right.
very specific. That's the whole point of verismo. It's right. about a recognizable world. It's...
yeah, that was a point I was trying to make.
That was the whole point of that artistic movement, is getting away from... she's a princess, but getting away from historical periods, dukes and duchesses and stuff like this, and actually putting a work. Listen, Giordano's first opera, Malavita, was the story of a prostitute living in where? In Sardinia or Naples? In Sardinia. And it's real verismo. I mean, the plot is corny to us. It's melodramatic and crazy. But the very, very fact that Emma Bellancioni, who actually created Fedora, was on stage playing a prostitute was radical. And the verismo composers consider themselves to be radical. It doesn't strike us as being radical now, but it was. And we have to somehow tap into the spirit of these operas in order to do them effectively.
Absolutely right. I'm curious about one thing. Shall I ask you? Why all this diva from Sardou makes so much mess? Mess. Look Tosca, look Fedora.
Because there were two things that Sarah Bernhardt had to do. She had to have a complicated love affair on stage, and she had to die. That was her. That was her cash. That was in her contract. That was the cachet. That is what she did, and it's just it's.
Yeah, but she died and she make trouble for the other life.
It had to be messy. It had to be messy.
It has to be messy. You know, otherwise it's no opera.
What? You know, she had a great contemporary, Eleonora Duse, who did all the Bernhardt plays in Italian and apparently did them much better, which Sarah Bernhardt couldn't stand. So at the age of 64, Sarah Bernhardt was back on the road playing Fedora and Tosca because Duzet was he was sort of like a method actor over time and was actually bringing these pieces to life in a way that Bernhardt could not do because she was an old-fashioned routinier. And, you know, she chewed the scenery, and that's what people liked. And we have all these operas based on these pieces written for this Monstre Sacré, which was Sarah Bernhardt. Fortunately, the operatic form is better able to accommodate these stories than the spoken dramatic form, which is why the Sardo plays have died, but the operas based on them continue to delight us today. The greatest one being Tosca, which we've done together.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that these messy women, as you say, Marco, they're so much unpredictable, and this creates a mystery around them. And those men, they were so fascinated by this. You know, they're enigmatic. They can't really find the answers.
Always use the power to make a mess.
But I'll tell you what is interesting about these characters is that they're not victims. That actually is interesting. That they're these parts created for Bernhardt. The female character is the instigator of the plot. She's active in the plot. She's not the passive victim of the plot, and that's actually terribly interesting for us now. It's one of the reasons Fedora actually. I mean, she does die in the end, but she dies bravely.
She dies
She
very
dies of her own
beautifully.
choice. She died
I'm glad.
in one page.
In one page.
That's
One
a
entire
miracle,
page.
yeah, just one page. Yeah.
Yes. You know, I had struggle with Fedora at the beginning because I didn't know if I really love her or not. And actually, when I understood that she's doing all of this because of love, because she's just in love, she wants love. And you have all the answers around this messy thing, why she cannot really react in the right way, why she didn't react in the moment she had to do it. Actually, she did it. But
but it's also interesting, like a character like Fedora. This is written in 1898. Yeah. What's fascinating is she has a sexual personality.
Wow.
This is really something for the time. Shocking. And revolutionary.
It's also shocking
you know,
today.
she's not just she's not another soprano dying of tuberculosis. I mean, even when Verdi wrote La Traviata, we don't actually discover much about Violetta as a sexual human being. But in Fedora, it's absolutely clear that everything she does for passion. And her sexual nature is explored openly. And that's another one of the reasons I found the opera very, very interesting.
Thank you.
You know, there's enormous. We saw today in the stage rehearsal when we put on stage for the first time Act 3. You've been rehearsing it, of course, in the room down below the stage for a couple of weeks. But the passion and chemistry between Sonya, you and Piotr is quite extraordinary. And you've worked together. I know at the Met in Louisa Miller a few years ago. Have you worked together elsewhere before?
Yeah, we met in Vienna actually.
In Vienna, we were doing Romeo and
Juliet. Yes.
And it was immediately
Yeah. It was really cool.
fireworks.
The funny thing was that my wife saw the rehearsals and she came to us and said, Piotr, about making some sexual contacts on the stage with your partner, with Sonya, please do more. And Sonya, I remember Sonya make eyes like that. Because it's about art.
I was debuting in the part, and I was debuting in this theater, and with him.
It was really nice. So, yeah, it works.
Yeah, we always had this chemistry together. Maybe because we're from the same sign. I don't know. He's a Capricorn. I'm a Capricorn. So.
Yeah, I think especially in this opera, your chemistry came out much powerfully.
Yes.
Because I don't know, maybe for the situation, for the libretto, for the production, for the music, I don't know why. But in this occasion, I find you both much more fireworks than the usual.
You know, the clue is that we listen to each other on the stage. It's not only singing and, you know, like I don't know, in Romeo and Juliet or Traviata or Rigoletto, whatever. We create a real moment on the stage, and when you're singing, I'm listening what you say, and when I'm singing, you listen to me, and that's kind of that's what works really. The creation of the moment on the stage, a dramatic moment.
Yeah, let's say it that when I always worked with Piotr, it was never about divo and diva. It was always about, you know, collaboration. We're here to work together in a team. I pretty much enjoy this, you know, Peter, you know this. And we found an incredible family with all the cast, but David and Marco together. This spirit is so important today, especially for me, but I believe for Piotr as well, and for every artist, to really do the job for the sake of the music and the story, and for the audiences. It's for me, it was never about to show how powerful is my voice and how many high notes and all these things. It's important, of course, but it's important as well to tell the story. And this is what I found with my friend Piotr.
Yeah. I'm absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
So with that, David and I discussed before that we would be very happy to take any questions from the audience. David wants to know what's on your mind, and as I'm sure our singers and conductor would as well. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And if you don't, we'll ask ourselves some more questions.
Don't be shy.
Any
Nothing's
takers?
Anything but the telegrams.
Don't
ask about telegrams.
We're involved with telegrams in this period.
Yes, please.
Sir, can you talk more about that shift from the sopranos being victims to being
Active.
actors and
It just occurred to me, actually, just like in this discussion, because I do have problems with a lot of 19th century repertory, because the soprano, the female protagonist, is so often portrayed as a victim and so often lacks a rounded personality. And by that I mean like having a sexual dimension to her, which is openly expressed. And what I find really interesting moving into the verismo repertory is that comes into play. And I think that's why we love Tosca, because she's a highly sexualized creature, and like Fedora, what she does for passion. And I think doing pieces in historical operatic repertory where the female protagonist is empowered is a very interesting thing to do and a very positive thing to do. So I think that's all I was trying to say.
And certainly you, with Medea, which you directed, that's a
yes,
story
she's
of female
very
empowerment.
She takes the ultimate revenge, as we discussed at the, yeah.
I thought I saw another hand over here. No? Yes.
So for David and for Marco, can you talk about the process of approaching an opera musically?
Like that?
Making it live and theatrically?
Well, actually, we already, from my point of view, musically, I started in a good position, because already the music, it's beautiful. To listen, it's very grateful and nice. So when we start to work in the score, and that happened when I was kid, because I have a background with Fedora. I can't tell you the story of my Fedora life, but I played Bolesław Latzinski on stage 30 years ago, no, maybe more, 50 years ago. And now I start to conduct in Fedora later on. And I told you it's not happened often in my career, because it's an opera that's not performing so much as Tosca, Rigoletto, Traviata, and the other rest of the famous Italian opera. But still, in my life, happens many times. So I start already in a good position to Fedora. And then after Fedora, I learned Andrea Chenier. And the both kind of wrote from Giordano are similar. I can tell you, I told you before that he wrote Andrea Chenier first and Fedora later on. I find Fedora much approach to Tosca than Andrea Chenier. It's funny because, of course, we know that Giordano loves Puccini and he asking a lot of suggestion how composing things, and they was like they know each other, and Giordano has a great admiration of Puccini. You can find in the music because it's verismo, but it's so romantic in the same time. So for my point, approaching to Fedora already was a good start, and I was already preparing my background from kid. Do the piece is totally different thing. Because when you start to read the score and learn what it is a libretto and what means play certain chord in some way, or decide to do some strappato in the orchestra, some legato, I mean, it's a big work, of course, as any opera I do. But in this special case, I found the Fedora, it's so complicated in a way, and so natural at the end when you listen it. It's kind of controversial things. You work a lot to make that easy at the end. And the same, I think, has happened on stage. We have such a complicated story to tell, and in the same way, when you watch that, it's become natural because it's modern, because it's the same music is so approachable. We listened 3 minutes to the intermezzo, I already was in love with this kind of music because it's so direct and it's so beautiful made for in a certain way. So that is my approach to the opera like Fedora. And in the same time, I think the stage has the same kind of approach to make the life easy to audience and be more direct and natural in what we do. And the music will talk to you directly.
Marco, you have now had orchestra readings with, with your orchestra. So this piece, like Medea, is very completely unfamiliar to them. So how is that to work with that?
Yeah, but in the same time, you know, this kind of orchestra that's so flexible, so I can tell you, they play Wagner in the morning and they play Strauss in the evening and they play Don Giovanni the same morning. And I mean, I have amazing admiration for the musician because this kind of professionality and they really want to play as best they can all the time. And of course, it's evident because every time you listen to the sound of the Metropolitan Orchestra, you fall in love because this orchestra is very special for opera. I think it's a #1 by distance with the other orchestra in the world. So during the rehearsal, of course, they are very interested about the history because they want to know what's going on stage to play properly on style, and they listen it a lot. And they know what's going on. And they, of course, when I told them the history, I felt that the orchestra was so attentive every single word of the history. And at a certain point, when the time at the first reading was off, and I tell them, okay, I will tell you what's going on in Switzerland in Act 3. And some people from the orchestra says, I'm not called for the next rehearsal, but I want to know what's going on. And that was so natural, so interesting, because of course it's part of the job. It's part to be professional, know exactly what's going to play and what I'm conducting, what he does on stage, what Sonya saying. Everyone have his single part in this amazing world that the opera world, and everyone is so important. Everyone is in the details so important. When I saw the painting of Patrick in Act 1, I mean be professional. I mean like even dedicate a portrait of an actor that not even sing a note, but he have his own portrait in the production, and
we
it's
should,
him.
we should explain. We should explain.
We,
that
we need to explain the gentleman sitting up
Yes.
there.
He's
is
playing.
the
He's
he's
playing
the actor who plays
Vladimir
Vladimir,
Andreevich.
her lover,
her lover.
who dies.
Yeah, you can hear it by the scream at the end of Act One.
But Patrick plays a much bigger role in
Yeah.
the production than in normal productions of Fedora.
Exactly.
Because a thematic choice that I made was to keep Vladimir present as a memory inside her brain, almost as a ghost-like figure, as something she cannot shake off, emphasizing what Sonya was talking about, that everything that Fedora does is motivated by passion. So it's one of the kind of interesting things that we're doing this with this production. But this is the guy we're referring to all the time, in case you're wondering.
He traveled a lot, no?
Yeah, but that
In
was
St.
very.
Petersburg and
Yeah,
also
but
in
it's
Paris
very
and also
specific
in
that
Switzerland.
an actor got exactly his portrait and is so talking about this wonderful production means every single detail is care, and it's very pleased when you do a job like that.
Piotr just told me that there was an aria written in the first act for
Should be
baritone,
actually, yeah?
for your character.
Yeah, yeah. And you were actually a baritone.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Thanks God.
Any other questions? What are your? We have what? 10 days. Whenever New Year's Eve is. So, do you have any final thoughts, David and company?
It's great, come.
That's good. Sonya?
I can tell you, it's a short opera, but very intense. Yeah. Very intense. I mean, people that see this opera for the first time are really impressed about how much power can be opera in a drama way.
Sonya, Piotr?
I would say that for me it's a real pleasure to do this with you guys. And
to us.
adding the Met Orchestra that I also adore, and maybe it's one of the only orchestra maybe in the world who I see when I'm on stage, they're like this. Yeah. They're listening to the voice, and they can adapt because, we are not every day the same. One day we're like this, one day we have other problems, and not every show is the same. But they are here with us and they make music with us. And for me, I'm sure, I hope I cross fingers, no viruses, no problems.
No, it's fine.
That we do have a good first night.
No, we have really 10 days more, and we have a couple of rehearsals, and so for me it's very important because I'm doing this first time to have a good orchestra rehearsal with Marco also before the shows goes on, and well, we will have a lot of fun in this thriller.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Well,
I survive.
Yes.
The only one.
But your heart is broken.
My heart
I
is broken
survived.
already at the beginning of the opera. That's really complicated. I'm sad all the time. I try to be happy, and David cut my happiness immediately. On
Well,
my
as-
lyric attitude to the role. It's. But we're joking with Sonya. So 2 weeks ago, so after the first couple of rehearsals with David, we could actually just sing the productions with Marco and David. That will be fine for our singers' life. Yeah, we could
Just work with them.
Yeah, just Marco on the
But
beat.
only-
for
and on-
Forever.
all operas and only productions of David.
but only at the
Life will
Met,
be
right?
so great. Okay, if you say that.
What David said and Marco, what they said before, it's really essential. David said, I want to say the story in the best way. And who is talking about that today? Almost nobody. And Marco said, for me, it's about music. I'm in love with the music. And when you hear conductors saying that, opera, it's about one concept. And this concept is about the music and the story. That's it.
It's very simple at the end. It's very difficult to do, but very simple.
And then you can enjoy this the most.
Of course.
And then you make up your mind.
Great. All right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you all so much. Thank you all for being here. Look forward to
Thank
seeing
you
you.
to be here.